Welcome to the pod key summary of Edinburgh Castle. Edinburgh Castle looks timeless, but its story is really about constant change, shaped by rock, war, monarchy, memory, and tourism. It sits on the plug of an ancient volcano, survived around 26 sieges, shifted from royal home to military fortress, and now holds some of Scotland's most symbolic treasures while welcoming more than 2 million visitors a year. What's striking is how the same place can be a battlefield, a birth chamber, a memorial, and a giant public stage all at once. The castle's position starts with geology. Castle Rock is the hardened dolerite plug of an extinct volcano from roughly 350 million years ago, and later, glacial erosion stripped away the softer rock around it. That left these dramatic cliffs on three sides, with one main approach from the east, which is basically a defensive dream if you're trying to hold a strong point. But the rock created a problem too. Basalt is highly impermeable, so the upper ward depended on wells, and those could run dry during droughts or under siege. So the thing that made the castle so hard to attack also made it vulnerable if attackers could just wait long enough, which feels like a very old lesson in real estate. Researchers identified 26 sieges across about 1,100 years of the castle's history, which helps explain why it's often described as perhaps the most besieged place in Great Britain and one of the most attacked sites in the world. That reputation wasn't built on one dramatic episode either. The castle kept getting pulled into the biggest conflicts in Scottish history. During the Wars of Scottish Independence, the English captured it in 1296. Then in 1314, Thomas Randolph's men retook it by climbing the rock, which is one of those stories that sounds impossible right up until it works. And in 1341, the Scots captured it again through an attack disguised as a merchant supply delivery, which proves deception has always been part of siege warfare too. If one siege shows the turning point in the castle's military history, it's the Lang Siege of 1571 to 1573. Mary, Queen of Scots' supporters held the fortress during that Civil War struggle, and the siege showed just how much warfare had changed. English artillery fired roughly 3,000 shots into the castle. That bombardment collapsed David's Tower and the Constable's Tower and destroyed much of the medieval fortifications. It's a pretty stark reminder that even a volcanic fortress stops looking invincible once heavy guns enter the picture. And on top of the physical damage, the siege exposed that water weakness again, because wells inside the castle could become a serious liability when a siege dragged on. Edinburgh Castle didn't begin as just a fortress. For centuries, it was also a royal residence. It remained a royal home until 1633, but from the late 15th century onward, that role was already fading, as Holyrood House was built and monarchs shifted their priorities. What's fascinating is how many state functions ended up layered into this one site. At different times, it served as a royal residence, arsenal, treasury, archive, mint, prison, military garrison, and the home of the honors of Scotland. Even now, the military role never fully went away. The British Army still controls the new barracks and regimental museums, and the castle remains the headquarters of the Royal Regiment of Scotland and the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. The castle is also closely tied to Mary, Queen of Scots, in a very personal way. She gave birth to James VI there, in a small room of the royal palace, on 19th of June 1566. That means this fortress wasn't just a seat of power in the abstract. It was a setting for events that shaped the monarchy itself. Then there's the Crown Room, which preserves the honors of Scotland. Those regalia were rediscovered by Sir Walter Scott in 1818, after people believed they'd been lost following the 1707 Union. The Stone of Scone, returned to Scotland in 1996, is also kept there. So inside these military walls, you also get some of the most charged symbols of Scottish statehood and identity. One of the most affecting parts of the castle's story is the Scottish National War Memorial. Its rolls of honor name more than 147,000 Scottish soldiers killed in the First World War. Another 50,000 names were added after the Second World War, and further names continue to be recorded. That gives the castle a different kind of gravity. It's not only about kings, sieges, and spectacle, it's also a place where national memory is kept in a very direct, personal form. Very little of the medieval castle survived untouched, because the Lang siege wrecked so much of it. The big exception is St. Margaret's Chapel, dating from the reign of David I in the early 12th century, and it's regarded as Edinburgh's oldest building. The Great Hall tells the broader story of reinvention really well. It started as a medieval royal assembly space, then became barracks under Oliver Cromwell, was later subdivided for soldiers, served as a military hospital, and eventually was restored in the 19th century. Even restoration itself has been debated. The late 19th century rebuilding of the Argyll Tower was described as restoration in an extreme form, reflecting the Scots baronial taste of the period more than strict preservation. So when people talk about the castle as ancient, that's true, but it's also a place repeatedly edited by later generations. What keeps Edinburgh Castle especially interesting is that it still functions as a living national symbol. In 2025, it attracted 2,044,963 visitors, and more than 70% of leisure visitors to Edinburgh reportedly go there, making it Scotland's second most visited tourist attraction. The Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo has also turned the fortress into a global performance venue. It draws roughly 217,000 people annually and is broadcast in about 30 countries to an estimated television audience of 100 million. And then there's the 1 o'clock gun, which began in 1861 as a practical time signal for ships in Leith and the Firth of Forth. Now it's ceremonial, though it did have one known wartime use during a Zeppelin raid in 1916, when it was fired unsuccessfully and with blanks, which is not the most encouraging phrase in military history. Still, it says a lot that even the traditions people think of as charming and familiar started as practical tools in a working fortress. Edinburgh Castle endures because it's never been just one thing. It's a volcanic outcrop, a battered stronghold, a royal landmark, a military base, a storehouse of national symbols, and a place where people still gather every day to remember, to visit, and sometimes to hear a cannon go off after lunch. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.